Let's rationalize this trinomial surd, having 3 terms at the denominator. Step number 1, we're going to rewrite the given question. Step number 2, we're going to group the denominator into 2. The first 2 terms will become the first term, and after the operator we're going to have the second term. Now we have a conjugate binomial surd. Next, we're going to consider this denominator and multiply this with root 5, and this is root 6, and this is root 3. Also at the denominator, this is root 5, this is root 6, and this is root 3. Next, the first 2 groups will maintain their operator, which is a minus. However, the operator separating the 2 terms, here is a plus, will change to a minus here. This is step number 3. Next, we're going to multiply out these 2 brackets. Next, 2 multiplied by the square root of 5. We're going to have 2 the square root of 5. Next, 2 will multiply minus the square root of 6. We're going to have minus 2 multiplied by the square root of 6. Next, 2 will multiply minus the square root of 3. We're going to have minus 2 multiplied by the square root of 3. Next, at the denominator, the square root of 5 will multiply the square root of 5. And we're going to have the square root of 5 times 5. 5 times 5 will give you root 25. And the square root of 25 is 5. Hence, this position becomes only 5. Next, root 5 will multiply minus the square root of 6. We're going to have minus the square root of 5 times 6. And 5 times 6 will give us 30 inside the square root. And here we're going to have root 30. Next, the square root of 5 will multiply minus the square root of 3. We're going to have minus the square root of 5 times 3. And here we're going to have minus the square root of 15. And the square root of 5 is done. Next, we're going to consider minus the square root of 6. Minus the square root of 6 will multiply this square root of 5. We're going to have minus in the square root 6 times 5. And we're going to have the square root of 30. Next, minus the square root of 6 will multiply minus the square root of 6. We're going to have plus the square root of 6 times 6. 6 times 6 will give you inside the square root 36. The square root of 36 will return 6. Here we have 6. Next, minus the square root of 6 will multiply minus the square root of 3. Minus times minus will give us a plus. And inside the square root, we're going to have 6 times 3. 6 times 3 inside the square root will return 18. And here we have the square root of 18. Minus the square root of 6 is done. Next, we'll consider the square root of 3. It will multiply the square root of 5. We're going to have plus the square root of 3 times 5. 3 times 5 will give us the square root of 15. Next, the square root of 3 will multiply minus the square root of 6. We're going to have minus inside the bracket 3 times 6, which is the square root of 18. Next, the square root of 3 will multiply minus the square root of 3. Plus times minus will give you minus. And inside the square root, we're going to have 3 times 3. Here, we're going to have the square root of 9. And the square root of 9 will return 3. Everything here becomes 3. Next, minus the square root of 15 will take away plus the square root of 15. Also, the square root of 18 will cancel minus the square root of 18. This is a constant 5. This is a constant 6. 5 plus 6 will give you 11. And 11 minus 3, which is also a constant, will return 8. This is the square root of 30. And this is the square root of 30. If the square root of 30 is an orange, minus one orange minus another orange will give you minus 2 oranges. We're going to use this analysis for the result of the denominator. Next, we're going to have 2 root 5 minus 2 root 6 minus 2 root 3, all divided by 8 minus 2 root 30. Next, at the numerator, 2 is common. Also, at the denominator, 2 is also common. We're going to factorize 2 out at the numerator. We're going to have root 5 minus root 6 minus root 3 in bracket divide by 2 is common here. We're going to have 2 in bracket. 2 times what will give you 8. We're going to have 4 minus, and here we're going to have root 30 in bracket. Next, these 2 we take away these 2. Now we are left with the square root of 5 minus the square root of 6 minus the square root of 3 divided by 4 minus the square root of 30. But we still have a problem at the denominator. Our aim is to rationalize the denominator by eliminating all the irrational numbers, the radicals at the denominator. But we still have the radical remaining at the denominator. We are going to rationalize again. Next, we're going to write out the square root of 5 minus the square root of 6 minus the square root of 3 divided by 4 minus the square root of 30. Next, we're going to consider the denominator. The operator here is a minus. We're going to change this to a plus when we multiply this with this conjugate for the numerator and for the denominator. That is, we're going to multiply this with 4 plus root 30 divided by 4 plus root 30. Next, we're going to multiply out these brackets. Next, the square root of 5 will multiply by 4. And we're going to have 4 times the square root of 5. Next, the square root of 5 will multiply the square root of 30. We're going to have plus the square root of 5 times 30, which is the square root of 150. Next, minus the square root of 6 will multiply by 4. We're going to have minus 4 multiplied by the square root of 6. Next, minus the square root of 6 multiply by the square root of 30. We're going to have minus inside the square root 6 multiplied by 30. And here we're going to have minus the square root of 180. Next, minus the square root of 3 will multiply by 4. We're going to have minus 4 multiplied by the square root of 3. Next, minus the square root of 3 will multiply the square root of 30. We're going to have minus inside the square root 3 times 30. Inside the square root, we're going to have the square root of 90. At the denominator, we're going to have 4 times 4 is 16. Next, 4 will multiply by the square root of 30. We're going to have plus 4 times the square root of 30. Next, minus the square root of 30 will multiply by 4. We'll have minus 4 multiply by the square root of 30. Next, minus times plus is a minus. The square root of 30 multiply the square root of 30. Inside the square root is going to be 30 times 30. And 30 times 30 will give you 900. And the square root of 900 will return 30. Everything here becomes 30. Usually at the denominator, we'll say this times this and this times this, because the middle will always cancel out. Next, we're going to simplify the square root of 150, the square root of 180, and the square root of 90. The square root of 180 is, we're going to draw a line. This is 180. We're going to consider all the factors that will go into 180 without a remainder. We're going to start with 2. 2 into 18 will give you 9. Here we have a 0. 2 can still go into 90 and we're going to have 45. 2 cannot go into 45 without a remainder, but 3 can go into 45. 3 into 4 will give you 1. Remainder 1. 3 into 15 will give you 5. Remember, when we are dividing, we divide in this direction. And when we are multiplying, we multiply in this direction. Next, 3 divided by 15, we have 5. 3 cannot go again, but 5 into 5 is 1. When we get 1, we stop. Next, this 2 has a pair, it is free. This 3 has a pair, this 3 is also free. 5 got no pair. We're going to put this 5 inside the square root. 2 times 3 is 6, and we have root 5. Instead of the square root of 180, we are going to write 6 root 5. Next, for the square root of 150, we are going to write down 150 and consider all the factors that will go into 150 without a remainder. We start with 2. 2 into 15 will give you 7. Remainder 1. We'll put the 1 here. 2 into 10 is 5. 2 cannot go into 75 without a remainder. But 3 into 7 will give you 2. Remainder 1. 3 into 15 will give you 5. 3 cannot go anymore, but 5 can go. 5 into 25 is 5. 5 can still go and we have 1. Once we get 1, we stop. Next, we pay. This 5 got a pay. 5 is free. But 2 got no pay. 3 also has no pay. we're going to put both of them inside the square root. Here we're going to have 5 root 6. Instead of the square root of 150, I will write 5 root 6. Next, for the square root of 90, I will draw a line. I will write 90. All the factors of 90, I will start with 2. 2 into 90 will give me 45. 2 cannot go without a remainder. I will go with 3. 3 into 4 is 1. Into 15 is 5. 3 can still go. 3 into 15 is 5. 3 can no longer go. And I cannot use 4. But 5 into 5 will give me 1. Next, I will pair. This 3 has a pair. 3 is free. But 5 and 2 has no pair. I will multiply both of them inside the square root. I will have 3 root 10. Instead of the square root of 90, I will write 3 root 10. I will use this to simplify the given surd expression. I'm going to use this to simplify this surd expression. Next, here I will have 4 root 5 plus, instead of the square root of 150, I will write 5 root 6. Here is 5 root 6. Next, this is minus 4 root 6. Next, this is minus the square root of 180. And instead of writing minus the square root of 180, I'm going to write 6 root 5. And here I will write 6 multiplied by the square root of 5. Next, this is minus 4 root 3. Next, this is minus the square root of 90. Instead of writing the square root of 90, I will write 3 root 10. And here I will have minus 3 multiplied by the square root of 10. Next, at the denominator, I'll be left with 16 minus 30. Next, I have root 6 here. Likewise, I have root 6 here. If root 6 is an orange, 5 oranges minus 4 oranges, I'll be left with only 1 orange. Likewise, this is root 5, and this is also root 5. 4 mangoes minus 6 mangoes. We're going to have minus 2 mangoes. Root 3 is a separate entity, and root 10 is also a separate entity. We cannot add them to this. I'm going to use this to simplify this expression. Next, 5 root 6 minus 4 root 6. We're going to be left with root 6. Next, 4 root 5 minus 6 root 5. We're going to have minus 2 root 5. We are done with this. Here we have minus 4 root 3, and here we have minus 3 root 10. Divide by 16 minus 30 will leave us with minus 14. Next, this minus will multiply everything out. We're going to have minus, in bracket, the square root of 6 minus 2 multiplied by the square root of 5 minus 4 multiplied by the square root of 3 minus 3 multiplied by the square root of 10. Everything divided by 14. We have successfully eradicated all the radicals at the denominator. This minus is affecting everything. And it doesn't matter how you rearrange this. As long as we don't have any radical at the denominator, this remains our final answer. We have successfully rationalized this given algebraic surd.